Thanks for taking the time to chat today, guys, on our topic, that's everyday count. How about we start with some introductions and maybe we'll share a fact about ourselves that is in some way related to numbers or maths. So I'll kick it off. My name is Orla and I work as what's known as an actuary.
Thanks, Orla. I also work as an actuary, and I've also worked as an actuary for 5 years. A fact about me is I am really passionate about GAA. I love all things GAA. And I'm a coach. I coach my local club's under-21 team, and I'm also a player. So maybe where I've used maths in the recent past as one of those things, as a player, I'm the free kick taker for my team. So every time my team gets a free kick, I have to ask myself, how far out is it? Do I have a long enough kick to go for a point? How long is left in the game? What's the score? Do we need a point? Do we need a goal? And probably some other things as well. So there's 3 or 4 math things.
And what about you, Lynn?
Hello, my name's Lynn, and I am Australian Chinese, and I am actually as well living and working in Dublin at the moment. One fact relating to maths, I had to actually look this up just now. The longest running distance I've ever done is for 26.2 miles, which is 42.195 kilometers.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. That was a marathon, as you might have guessed, and that was back in a couple of years ago in Greece.
I'm glad my fact came before yours, because that's a very impressive fact to do with that. But lots of us encounter maths, I think, in our everyday life, and maybe a lot more than we realize or we're tuned into. So if you're open to it, would you each tell me the story of your day so far, and we'll see how many times you've happened upon numbers or maths or something to do with using your numerical skills. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Great. I'm going to count them on my hand.
So I got up this morning at 8 a.m. So I set an alarm a little bit later than I would a few months ago because of lockdown. So we're working from home. So I then went out for a quick run, 20-minute run, where I use an app, Map My Run, and that tells me my average pace, my distance covered, and my time elapsed. And that helps me figure out if I need to run faster, if I need to run slower, to get my time into the time that I want. Came home then, had a shower, so I had to set the temperature of the shower. That just about counts. Then I went down to the shops. I bought a coffee with some change.
And your change?
Yes, yeah. I also bought a scone. Then I came home and started working. And then I started using maths a whole lot more.
Okay, so you have at least 10 from, let's say, 8 o'clock this morning until maybe 9:30 or 10 o'clock this morning. Do you normally think of all of those encounters you have every day in your day-to-day routine as related to maths, or is this the first time you've really thought about it like that?
Well, the first time I thought about it was when you asked me to think about it.
Yeah, so there you go. 10 times before you even started work, you used maths. What about you, Lynn? If you were to tell the story of your day earlier today, how many times do you think you've used maths? I can count again.
I think there's a lot of similarities with David. Like I tried to set alarm, but sometimes I don't, I put on snooze for another 5 minutes and then another 5 minutes. So yeah, that's, you can add that. And then I'll try to go for a morning walk or run for 10 minutes. So I have a iWatch which tracks number of steps. I sometimes look my heart rate, because sometimes my heart rate gets, I always check against the average heart rate. If it's too high or too low, it helps me to know if I'm doing okay. And then yeah, I'll come home. I'll make breakfast. It's quite fixed. I'll have like a couple of eggs, so that's 2 eggs a day. So And then I do read sometimes the nutritional information. I don't know if you guys into that, you know, how many carbs and nutrition, like, I think it does help. I know sometimes if you eat something sweet, but it's not necessarily really high in calories. So it's good to double check that it is actually low, but still tastes good. So try to always look for that. So I check that. Any food you have, you can see the back package. And then I would log into work. I would, I mean, when we start working, there's numbers all the time, you know.
I can't count on two hands beyond once we log in because it's too difficult. Some other things I think I would come across in my daily routine, which is very similar to both of you, much the same as you've mentioned, Lynn. I wear a Fitbit during the day, so I'm always counting my steps to make sure that I'm not just sitting here in my living room as we work from home at the minute. Sometimes, because I live in Dublin, I will be looking for the bus numbers as they pass to get the bus into town. That's more when we were working in the town, but or in the city centre. But that's something I'm tuned into quite a bit. And then I really enjoy baking. So as not to make a complete mess of what I want to eat any given day, I usually have to use my weighing scales, weigh everything out to the best of my ability, and hope that it will come out looking like what it should on the recipe. But I think we are all probably a little bit more tuned in now to the extent to which we're using maths every day, and pat on the back for the amount of time we actually spend using maths outside of the working hours. But maybe then to think of your school maths and maths, your experience of what we would think of as maths when you were in school. What do you think was the most difficult thing about doing your maths homework when you were in school? So I can start and say what it was for me. Oftentimes you're adding things like X's and Y's, and in real life, I don't encounter a whole lot of X's and Y's. So it didn't seem like something I was ever going to need to use per se. It seemed quite abstract. So I thought it was quite difficult to get to grips with some of the material because it wasn't related to daily life in the same way that English or PE or some of the other subjects were. Davey, what do you think was challenging about maths in school?
Actually, one of the challenges for me, Orla, was I played a lot of sport in school. So I played soccer and GAA and even tennis. And sometimes if we had a game on, you would miss class for the game, which you get to do in secondary school sometimes, which is a great perk of playing sports, but it also means that you can fall behind a little bit in class, and particular with a subject like maths, it's really important that you're in class and you're hearing the teacher's explanations and things like that. So for me, a challenge was managing the sport and the maths at the same time. And it just meant I had to do a little bit extra in the evenings, maths wise. And sometimes when I did have a maths class, I'd hang back later on and ask the teacher a couple of questions. So that was actually my experience of a challenge, maths related.
What about you, Lynn? Were there things that you found challenging when you were back in school doing your maths?
I suppose, yeah, there's a lot of repetition in maths in some way, because I feel like, you know, you need to sort of do enough practice sometimes to really understand something or to really get better at a particular topic. So I think that was a challenge, is get enough practicing, try to get enough questions and attempt to do enough questions after school. So I think, yeah, it helps if you, I try to sort of make it like a game, or maybe just give yourself a really short time, like 5 minutes, and just try to get in as much and give yourself a reward at the end or something like that.
Working against the clock.
Yes, so.
Which also counts as using maths. So you're getting an extra maths homework there.
Have a little reward and tick off, and yeah, or playing games with your siblings or your parents.
Yeah, playing cards and playing other games. And then, so we've already kind of touched on it in playing our maths orientated game. Do you think that maths crops up a lot more in your hobbies, your interests, your life maybe outside of school or work, more than you might think? So for me, I think it does, particularly at the minute when you're working from home. I like to go outside, but you know, you need to be conscious at the minute of not meeting more than a certain number of households or a certain number of people, or maybe you need to tune into the distance that you're going, because depending on restrictions, maybe we can't go a certain distance, but you still want to get lots of steps in, or you want to get your run. So I think at the minute, especially, I'm using maths a lot more to understand the different reference points outside of my daily routine that are maybe told by the government or by my colleagues or by my peers, my classmates, my friends. And maths is kind of popping up for me a little bit all over the place. So what about you, Davy? Does it make an appearance in your hobbies or your interests that might surprise you or me?
Absolutely, Orla, yes. So I mentioned earlier on that when I play GAA, where I use maths, but also as a coach in particular, I have to use maths an awful lot. So for example, let's say we have a game that throws in at 2 p.m. We might decide to meet at 1:30. So that 30-minute period before the game, we need to have a schedule and we need to be very well organized. So for instance, we might say 5 minutes to let out the players to put the boots on and tog out. 8 minutes then for a warm up, so a jog around. 7 minutes then for some ball work drills, so some kicking, some passing. So that's 20 minutes. And then we might come back together and have the final team talk and the last messages. That might be, say, 6 minutes. And then if it's an important game, there might be a national anthem, which is another 3 minutes. So that all adds up to 29 minutes. I usually leave a minute or two spare just in case anything runs over. But that schedule has to be planned out in advance. Then you might get to, say, half time in the game. And I'd ask the statistician of our team, how are we doing on kickouts? So he might say, when we went high and long with the kickouts, we won 1 of 5. And when we went short and low with our kickouts, we won 8 of 10. So I quickly work out that we won 20% of the long kickouts, but 80% of the short ones. So the strategy then for the second half becomes quite clear. We won't go long with any of our kickouts. We'll go short with all of them because that's where we're getting the most success. And what that also might do is it might feed into a decision to bring in a smaller fast player and take off one of the tall, less mobile players because they're more likely to win those short kickouts. So it's interesting how maths really feeds into that decision-making process. So you might think that, GAA and maths or sport and maths are not related or not linked. But actually maths is very central to some of those decisions that coaches and managers would make.
And do you think when you're playing, so I don't play GAA, so I don't understand as well as you do what goes on the pitch, but do you think when you're on the pitch and you're watching the scoreboard and you're watching the clock running down and you're trying to communicate with your fellow teammates, there's actually quite a lot of maths going on and people don't even realize in that time or in that moment in time that they're doing all of these, let's say, sums in their brain in that moment?
Yes, definitely. Like it just becomes a subconscious thing. It's like taking a breath or blinking. You don't consciously do that. It just happens. It's learned behavior over time, and using your math skills becomes like that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely.
I sometimes think it's interesting how, I know I used to do it in school, you'd get halfway through a sum and then it would seem a little bit difficult, so you'd just leave it and come back to it, or you'd say you'd come back later. But like, you'd never bring the ball right to the edge of the net and then say, oh no, we don't actually need that point. I think I'll just walk away from it and leave it to someone else. But when you put it like that, it probably is similar. You'd see something through to completion if you knew you had a piece of it left to do and you knew the number you needed to get to, you would actually see it through on the pitch. So it's probably something similar in your maths in the classroom. Thanks for that, Davy. And what about you, Lynn? Would you find that maths makes an appearance in your hobbies or your interests outside of work?
Yes, for sure. Maybe in a hobby that a lot of people might not think is related to maths, I used to play a lot of piano. I still play a bit. I'm learning different instruments. It's all related. But I think, for those who think that, they're artistic and they're creative, but they must be not good at maths, I totally disagree with that. I think if you're good at music, if you're good at, arts, you can be 100% really good at maths, because there's so much maths involved with music. So for example, take piano, or for example, if you have to read the music, every piece of music comes in different keys, right? So there's low key, high key, there's a positive key with major key, minor key, and and everyone's voice, if you like singing, there's different key. So sometimes you need to there's a technical term called transpose. For those who learn music, you need to sort of bring it to a higher key or lower key to suit your own voice. So that transposition, that is math, because that's about calculating, you know, how much is the number of keys, the number of steps, I guess, in between from one key to another. So for E major to A major or F major to C major, you have to calculate that, you have to count that, and then that gives you that next key. And then from that, you can work out what all the other key and notes is supposed to be. And then you play accordingly to make the song sound exactly the same, but just in a different key. So that's one example, and in relating to music, and also the rhythm. Sometimes if you like a song to be a little bit faster or a little bit slower, you know, there's like the timing. So you have 2/4 time, 6/8 time, you know, and that's to do with how many keys you have in one bar in the music. So you can also change that, you know, depending on whether you want a faster, slower. So, but they can be consistent. So if a 6/8 time, there's like 3 beats, 1, 2, 3 in one bar, but you can make it 1 and 2 and 3, or 1 and 2, 3, you know, like changing the speed. But that's also math, you know, if you come to think about it. So, you know, I think definitely there's math everywhere. You just gotta look for and pay attention to it. Yeah.
I think something else I wouldn't have always thought of as maths, but it's related to music. At the minute when I go into Spotify, and sometimes I'll just choose a playlist that I haven't, you know, come up with myself, and then the most played song will be at the top. And sometimes I know I don't always know the name of a song. I might know the lyrics, but I wouldn't know what the name is. And I often find I get a great selection of really popular songs because the count of plays it's had is bringing it to the top of a list. So maths is kind of creeping in there, where you get a feel for what's popular and what people are listening to, and then you get to enjoy it as well. But it is ultimately driven by maths a little bit in the background.
For sure.
Moving on to something that's a little bit simpler, but still somewhat related to maths. Do either of you have a lucky number, and why? Davey?
Yeah, I would have, Orla. My lucky number would generally be my birthday, or if I was picking a set of lotto numbers, I'd pick my birthday, my parents' birthdays, my brother's birthday, you know, so certainly that would drive my lotto picks or lucky numbers.
We're all hoping they're going to be lucky, and then you can just share the winnings with all of us. Use some fractions to share the winnings with all of us. What about you, Lynn? Do you have any lucky numbers?
I think just from my Chinese sort of cultural background, like number 8, as everyone knows, is like the lucky number. You know, it's just because the 8, the sound of the 8, in Chinese, the pronunciation is related to get wealthy, and that's somehow, yeah, and that's become, and that on the other hand, like that's why number 4 is like the most unlucky, just because it's in the sound of 4 in Chinese means death. So that's for some reason that it's very superstitious. I'm not promoting that here, so I'm just saying 8, you know, if I can choose 8, I'll choose 8, but you know, let's see.
I would also like to have lucky numbers in a full set that would allow me to win the lotto. So if either of you have those numbers, I'd like to be made aware of what they are. When you think back to doing your maths homework when you were in school, what advice would you give to, say, school Orla, school Davy, or school Lynn as to how to tackle it? So if I could talk to me doing my homework now, I think I would say, try and understand where you're already using this. So if you're working on addition, you already know how many friends you have in your friend group, and you know, adding another person to that, and how many people you can bring in the car when you go to the cinema, or you go to, you know, see a match, or you know, if someone in your family is expecting a baby, you're adding another person to the family. And I think applying all of the basic mathematical concepts to your real life can really help you understand and feel more confident in how you're using math. I think sometimes it's hard to see where you're going to need these things. It's like saying you can't add X's and Y's, but then in real life you can't add apples and oranges, some people say. And I think when you bring it down to something that you encounter every day, it's a lot easier to then get to grips with what your teacher is trying to tell you or to teach you. So would you have any advice for you doing your homework, maybe, let's say 10 years ago?
Yeah, or for me, Orla, I would say to people 2 things. One, you've kind of touched on earlier. If you're struggling with a problem, sometimes the best thing to do, particularly with a math problem, is just get up, leave your desk, go away for a half an hour, or do some other subject, and come back. And it's incredible how often you find when you come back to it, you just think of something slightly differently. So I suppose the key thing is don't give up. If you can't get it now, come back to it a bit later on, or get some help off your parents or a teacher, or a friend. But don't give up. Like, all three of us work in maths, or have maths related jobs, but have all met math problems that we couldn't solve, or
and continue to do it every day.
yeah, or certainly that we couldn't initially, and then you work your way around it. So don't give up is the key thing. And you will have times where it seems really, really hard, but that's also what's challenging about it, and what's interesting about it is that there are really hard problems. So it's kind of exciting that there's problems there that are challenging. Even the smartest people find them hard to solve. So that would be the first thing that I'd say. The second thing is just when you're doing your maths homework, I'd say don't absolutely fly through it. I think some people do that. So you get 5 questions, you do them as quickly as you can, you don't think about it, and you move on to your English homework.
I always did that. Just get it done as quick as you can.
So I think with that, if your teacher gives you 5 questions, there's a good chance that the first and the second one are probably quite simple, but the third and fourth are a little bit trickier, and the fifth one is the hardest. And if you fly through them, you'll always find the fifth one is the one you got wrong because you didn't quite read the problem right, or you didn't see the extra little difficult bit that had been added on from the first few. So take your time with them, and really try and get them right, and that's probably the best way to learn. And so that'd be my 2 tips.
What about you, Lynn?
Yeah, all really good tips. What I have to add to that, I think if I had to give myself advice, I would have preferred if I did more, I guess, talking, about the problem I'm stuck on, say, because I found that sometimes some maths problem can be so abstract or so complex. There's so many informations, and we can just get so lost in it, and it can be a bit, or hard to digest altogether. So if you sit back and just try to put it together in your head and imagine, and go and find someone if you can. I don't know if you can find someone like maybe your granny or someone who don't mind listening to you, and just try to really break it down, try to break down the problem, explain to someone who have totally no background to this. Just, this is what I'm trying to do, this is the problem, and from doing that, and I think you can probably figure out the answer from just actually talking. Because sometimes if you have to explain something to someone, you actually have to understand that even better. It forces you to think more, and I think that would have helped me a lot more to really grasp the logic, the topics. That's
a really good one, because I think
Yeah.
even outside of the classroom, you can use that when, say, if you're in a shop and you don't get the right change and you notice that you haven't received the right change, if you can comprehend in your own mind how much you've given them, how much you should have received, when you go back up to the counter to ask for the correct change, it's a lot easier to have that discussion with the person in the shop, because you know what your points are in terms of like how much you should have received back and how much you're short in what they've given you. So I think that's actually a really good piece of maths advice in general in life.
Probably related to that as well is it's often really good to draw out a diagram or a little picture for yourself, so your brain can kind of look at it slightly differently. So if you're looking at something one way and you just can't figure it out, maybe it's just come at it a different way if you think of it visually, or use objects or something to try and come at it from a different way, that you might have a better chance of understanding it. But I think that's really good, Lynn.
I assume you do that in sport when you draw up a team plan or something on a whiteboard where you show where everyone's going to be positioned on the field. Would you do that kind of thing when you're playing GAA?
Yeah, you'd have your formation, or what way the team was going to line out. So what you might have is a little whiteboard with markers, and you move them around as players are moving around, different strategies. So rather than just talking them through, it can be easier for players to see it if you have little markers that they can actually visualize what's going on. So it's a similar concept.
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I used to be involved with drama, and we used to do it on the stage as well, where you'd have a certain number of people in different rows so that they could all be seen, and then you'd have markings on the floors where they were going to stand. So I think those concepts of drawing a diagram or illustrating out a particular problem, as you said, Lynn, is actually very relevant in later and earlier life. One final question. I know for me, maths has brought a lot of interesting things into my life. It's allowed me to travel. It's allowed me to become friends with people who live all around the world, some of whom I work with and some of whom were classmates and work friends of mine who've gone to live in other places. And it's also allowed me to earn a living, which gives me a lifestyle that allows me to have hobbies and interests and socialize with my friends in a way that makes me very happy. So Davy, what would you say are some interesting things that maths has brought into your life?
For me, Orla, I'd say the most interesting thing has been the fact that it's enabled me to meet a lot of really good friends. So when I went to university, I met a lot of like-minded people, or people who had similar interests, or people who maybe just had a similar way of thinking or similar way of seeing the world. And then when I went on and started working, again, I met people like that who've now become really good friends. So for me, that's probably my experience, or that'd be my response to that question.
And what about you, Lynn? Is there something really interesting that maths has brought into your life?
Yeah, for sure. Like it allows me to obtain actually a qualification, which definitely it's the enabler for me to be able to travel and work internationally, which is something which is amazing, and I'm definitely not taking it for granted. I know there's not a lot of jobs who have this kind of opportunity, so it's allowed to travel and experience in different kind of culture, life, seeing different things. So I'm really grateful to be able to have the opportunity because of the maths that I have done. Thank you.
Quite an impressive collection of things that maths have allowed us to do and continue to allow us to do, including hobbies, traveling, new friends, using it outside of school. I think for most of us, we're using it more outside of our school settings and work settings than we do inside. So hopefully lots of other people would see it like that as well. But thank you both for your time and for sharing the numbers in your day and for making today count for you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.